Hey there, and welcome to Boys Love Story, where we bring you touching BL school romances that will warm your heart and stir your emotions. Each episode on this channel is a unique journey of love. Whether it's sweet, slow burn, dramatic, or healing, our stories are crafted to make you feel seen and comforted. Today's story falls into the school BL genre and is all about young love, emotional growth, and moments that make your heart flutter. Title: He was sick, I visited at midnight. Genre: sweet romance, drama, school life, happy ending. So grab your headphones, get cozy, and let your imagination drift into a world where boys fall in love, quietly, boldly, and beautifully. Renji wasn't in class today. It shouldn't have mattered to Hayato. After all, Renji was loud, unpredictable, and always one step away from trouble. But the moment Hayato walked into the classroom and saw that empty seat in the far left corner by the window, something felt off. Renji always showed up. Late, maybe. Slouched in his seat, shirt untucked, headphones still dangling around his neck, but present. Somehow, his presence filled a space that now felt hollow without him. Hayato tried not to think about it during morning lessons, but his eyes kept drifting toward the empty desk. It was strange, noticing someone he barely spoke to. But there was something about Renji, an energy that made it impossible to ignore him. At lunch, while eating silently in the courtyard, Hayato overheard two classmates whispering nearby. "I heard he lives alone. Like, completely alone. His parents moved overseas or something." "Seriously? That guy?" "Makes sense." No one around to tell him off. Hayato didn't know if it was true. He didn't want to care. But somehow he did. That evening after school, Hayato found himself standing in front of a modest apartment building a few blocks from campus. It was almost dark. The sky was heavy with clouds, and the wind had picked up, cool and damp. Hayato clutched the small convenience store bag in his hands, filled with things he wasn't sure were the right choice: instant porridge, bottled water, some medicine. "What am I even doing?" he asked himself. He climbed the narrow staircase to the second floor, stopped at room 204, and hesitated. For a moment, he almost turned around. Then he knocked. At first, no answer. Then came the sound of shuffling, something dropping, and finally, the door creaked open. Renji stood there, bleary-eyed and pale, hair sticking to his forehead. He blinked a few times before narrowing his eyes. "Hayato?" His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. He looked genuinely confused. "What are you?" "You weren't at school," Hayato said, trying to sound casual. "I was nearby." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Renji stared at him for a long second, then turned away, stumbling back into the dimly lit room. "I didn't ask you to come," he muttered, collapsing onto the futon laid out on the floor. "I didn't ask for your permission," Hayato replied, stepping inside and shutting the door behind him. The apartment was small and cluttered, but not messy. There was a faint smell of instant noodles and fabric softener. A single blanket was half kicked off the futon, and a damp towel sat crumpled on the floor. Hayato knelt beside him and touched his forehead. Renji flinched slightly, but didn't move away. "You're burning up," Hayato said quietly. Renji made a weak sound that might have been a laugh. "You're surprisingly bossy for someone who never talks." Hayato rolled his eyes, but didn't respond. He unpacked the bag and began preparing the porridge in the tiny kitchen area. From behind him, Renji spoke again, voice faint. "You know you didn't have to come." Hayato paused, then said, "I know." "But you did." A silence passed between them. Not awkward, just soft. When the porridge was ready, Hayato helped Renji sit up and fed him a few slow spoonfuls. Renji barely had the strength to hold the bowl himself. "Don't tell anyone you saw me like this," he mumbled, cheeks faintly pink from more than just the fever. Hayato gave a small smile. "I won't." Renji looked at him, eyes heavy with exhaustion, but something else too, something softer. "You're weird, you know that?" "I've been told." Later, after helping Renji change into clean clothes and making sure he took the medicine, Hayato sat by the bedside, watching over him as he dozed off. The rain had started outside, tapping gently against the window. Renji stirred in his sleep and murmured something. Hayato wasn't sure what. His fingers reached out, weakly brushing against Hayato's sleeve. Hayato didn't move away. For someone who acted like he didn't need anyone, Renji looked incredibly fragile when asleep. Hayato stayed until past midnight, only leaving after making sure Renji was breathing steadily, a faint color returning to his cheeks. As he stepped out into the rain, Hayato realized his uniform was damp, and he hadn't eaten dinner. But oddly, he didn't feel tired. He felt something else. Warmth, maybe? Or the beginning of something he wasn't ready to name. Not yet. The sky outside had long faded to a deep navy blue, and the city was quieting down. Inside the small apartment, the only light came from the low lamp on the floor beside Renji's futon, casting a warm glow across the room. Hayato sat cross-legged beside him, carefully wiping the sweat from Renji's forehead with a cool cloth. The fever hadn't fully broken, but Renji was no longer burning up like before. Renji was half awake, eyes fluttering open now, and then before sliding closed again. "You're still here," he murmured, voice raspy. "Yeah," Hayato replied quietly, wringing the cloth and placing it back on Renji's forehead. "You really are weird." There was no bite in Renji's tone, just exhaustion and something else. A hint of disbelief, maybe. Hayato didn't answer. He just sat with him, watching as the boy who was always loud and brash slowly melted into something more vulnerable. After a long pause, Renji spoke again, his voice softer than Hayato had ever heard. "You know, I always figured if I disappeared one day, no one would care." "Not really." Hayato looked at him, startled. "I mean, people notice me because I'm loud, or I make trouble, but it's not the same as mattering. You know?" Renji gave a weak chuckle. "It's like I exist to fill the background noise." Hayato's throat tightened. He wasn't good with words, never had been. But something about hearing Renji, of all people, say things like this left a dull ache in his chest. "You don't have to keep pretending all the time," Hayato said suddenly. Renji blinked at him. "Pretending what?" "That you're okay. That being alone is what you want." Renji stared. Lips parted like he was about to argue, but nothing came out. Finally, he gave a small, tired laugh. "Seriously? You're weird." Hayato exhaled through his nose, something between a sigh and a laugh, and stood to refill the water bottle beside the futon. He didn't say anything more, but Renji's words lingered in the room long after the conversation faded. It was almost 1 a.m. when Hayato finally left. He closed the apartment door quietly behind him, stepping into the cool night. The rain had stopped, but the pavement still glistened under the streetlights. Hayato didn't notice the figure watching from across the street, someone he barely recognized from school, eyes wide, phone in hand. The next morning at school, the whispers started. Hayato could feel it the moment he stepped into the hallway, eyes lingering a little too long, conversations abruptly pausing when he walked past. He didn't think much of it at first. He never paid much attention to gossip. But at lunch, while sitting quietly in the courtyard with his bento, Kana walked over and sat beside him without asking. "You went to Renji's last night, didn't you?" she asked directly, folding her arms. Hayato didn't answer right away. He kept chewing his food, eyes on the small patch of grass in front of him. She leaned closer. People are saying you stayed the night. That it wasn't just helping him. Hayato set his chopsticks down, finally meeting her eyes. So? Kana blinked, caught off guard by his blunt response. Is it true? She asked, her voice dropping lower. Why would you go there? You barely talk to anyone. Hayato stood up and dusted off his pants, grabbing his lunchbox. I don't owe you an explanation, he said simply. Then he walked away, leaving Kana staring after him. In the hallway later that day, Renji returned to school. He still looked pale. But the fever was gone. His uniform was slightly wrinkled, and he walked a bit slower than usual, but the moment his eyes met Hayato's from across the corridor, something passed between them. Quiet recognition. Renji smirked, raising an eyebrow. Hayato gave the smallest of nods. That night, Hayato found himself lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. He could still hear Renji's voice, soft and tired, murmuring about loneliness and not mattering. He remembered the way Renji had looked at him. Like Hayato was something he didn't expect, didn't think he deserved. Hayato turned over, tugging the blanket up to his chin. He didn't care about the rumors. But he did care about Renji. And that scared him more than anything else. The hallway was loud as always. Sneakers squeaking on polished floors, lockers clanging open and shut, someone laughing too hard a few meters away. It was a typical Monday morning. Normal. Unchanged. And yet, Hayato felt everything had shifted. Renji had returned to school that day, walking into class like nothing had happened. His usual swagger was intact, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed. Joking with classmates like always. Not even a hint that, just a few nights ago, he'd been sick in bed, barely able to sit up, quietly confessing things Hayato still couldn't shake from his mind. Hayato watched him from across the room, jaw tight. Did that night mean nothing? At lunch, Hayato caught him alone behind the gym, half a sandwich in hand. Renji looked up lazily, as if he'd been expecting him. You look tense, Renji said with a smirk. Come to deliver more porridge. Hayato didn't laugh. What's with you? Renji blinked. What do you mean? You're acting like nothing happened. Renji took a bite, chewing slowly. What did happen, Hayato? You know what I mean. Renji shrugged. You helped me. That's all. You were being nice. I get it. Hayato clenched his fists at his sides. No, he said sharply. I wasn't just being nice. That made Renji pause. He looked up, really looked this time. But instead of responding, he stuffed the last of his sandwich into his mouth and muttered, Don't overthink it. Hayato felt something hot rise in his chest. Anger? Embarrassment? He wasn't even sure. But Renji was retreating. And Hayato didn't know how to stop him. By the next day, the rumors had teeth. Someone had seen Hayato arguing with Renji near the gym. Someone else said they saw Hayato leave Renji's apartment late at night, again. Takuma, with a mocking smile, declared in the classroom loud enough for others to hear. Guess nerd boys got a thing for bad boys now. Hayato ignored it at first. But the laughter got louder. Whispers followed him in the halls, snickers behind his back. His name, paired with Renji's, was scribbled across a bathroom stall in marker pen. The word desperate circled beneath it. By the third day, even teachers seemed to be watching. Ms. Naruse called him to the staff room after class. She sat behind her desk, hands folded neatly, and looked at him with that teacher's practice calm. Hayato, she said gently, I've heard some things. He stared at the floor. I want to believe they're just rumors, but your recent behavior has raised concerns. Being seen outside late, arguments in school corridors, emotional outbursts. You've always had a spotless record, don't ruin it now. Hayato's throat tightened. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not saying you did, she said. But perception matters. If this continues, it could affect your standing. Scholarships. College applications. He walked out of the room feeling like his lungs were wrapped in wire. Later that afternoon, he sat alone on the rooftop, the wind tugging at his sleeves. Below, students bustled in the courtyard. He could hear laughter again, loud, carefree. He closed his eyes. A shadow appeared beside him. He looked up to find Renji, hands shoved in his pockets, gaze flicking sideways. You're not eating, Renji said. Hayato didn't answer. I heard what they're saying, Renji added after a pause. Hayato laughed bitterly. Great. Everyone has. A beat passed. Then, quietly, you shouldn't have come that night. Hayato's head jerked toward him. You shouldn't have cared. Renji continued, voice low. I told you, people don't stay. You didn't have to prove me right. Then why won't you let me stay? Hayato asked, voice cracking. Renji froze. Hayato stood, facing him now, chest rising and falling. I don't care about the rumors. Or my record. He stopped himself, biting his lip. I just want you to stop pretending like none of it mattered. Renji looked away, jaw clenched. I'm not good at this, he muttered. I don't know how to be close. I thought if I pushed you away first, it'd hurt less. Hayato softened. The wind picked up again, blowing a strand of Renji's hair across his eyes. Hayato stepped closer. You're not alone anymore. Even if you're bad at this. A long silence stretched between them. Then, just barely, Renji nodded. That night, the whispers at school continued. But Hayato didn't walk alone. And Renji, for the first time, didn't run. The school days blurred into each other. Hayato kept his head down, choosing the longer paths between classes, skipping lunch altogether, and pretending the whispers didn't sting. He told himself it would pass, like all rumors do. But the more he distanced himself, the more he noticed something shift. Renji had stopped sitting by the window, stopped showing up on the rooftop, stopped looking for him. But that didn't mean Renji wasn't watching. That Wednesday, Renji stormed out of math class. He didn't bother giving an excuse, ignoring the teacher's protest as he walked straight out the door, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Hayato was where he always went when he didn't want to be seen, the back corner of the library, tucked behind the tall shelves of literature no one read anymore. He sat hunched over an open book. But his eyes weren't moving. He wasn't reading. He was hiding. And Renji found him anyway. You're really good at running, Renji muttered, his voice rough. Hayato froze. Renji stood there, arms crossed, chest rising and falling like he'd been holding back for days. Is this how it's gonna be now? You pretend none of it happened and I just disappear again? I'm not pretending, Hayato said quietly. Oh, really? Renji stepped closer. You won't look at me. You ignore me at lunch. You won't even sit in the same row anymore. What am I supposed to think? Hayato swallowed hard but stayed silent. Renji's voice cracked then, just a little. If you didn't care about me, Hayato, then why the hell did you come to my place that night? The words hit like a punch to the chest. Hayato finally looked up, eyes wide. Renji was trying to hold himself together, but his mask was slipping. Anger, pain, confusion, it was all there. Raw and real. And suddenly, Hayato couldn't keep the walls up anymore. Because I do care, he said, louder than he meant to. I've always cared. And I hate that I care this much. That I can't stop thinking about you, even when it's ruining everything else. The air in the library felt heavier, thick with everything unsaid. Renji blinked. His arm slowly dropped to his sides. Then stop pretending it's nothing, he whispered. Hayato stood there, heart pounding. I'm scared, he admitted, of losing everything I worked for. My grades, my future, my reputation. But every time I try to stay away from you, it hurts even more. A beat of silence passed between them. Then, from the next aisle over, a phone quietly locked. Kana, standing frozen behind the shelf, lowered her screen, where she had been preparing to post a cruel rumor to the school forum. She looked at the two boys, eyes wide, something flickering across her face, guilt, maybe, shame. And slowly, she hit delete. The next day, things were different. Small things. Someone erased the writing on the bathroom stall. Hayato's desk didn't have notes on it anymore. Even Takuma, for once, kept quiet. Hayato noticed, of course. But what mattered most was what he saw at the end of the hall that afternoon. Renji leaning against the windowsill, waiting. Not hiding. Not pretending. Just there. And for the first time in days, Hayato walked toward him. The text came just after noon. Renji, 1:03 p.m. Skipped school. Got hit with a cold again. Not dying, don't get dramatic. Hayato stared at the message for a long second before sighing. He didn't reply. He just packed his bag and made his way to the small convenience store by the station. Tea, porridge, cold medicine, cough drops. He knew the list by heart now. By late afternoon, he was standing in front of that familiar apartment door again, bag in hand. When Renji opened it, his hair was slightly damp. A blanket draped lazily over his shoulders. He raised an eyebrow. Was wondering if you'd come again, he said with a crooked smile. Hayato rolled his eyes but stepped in. You sound disappointed. Not disappointed, Renji said, closing the door behind him. Just surprised you're still willing to risk your spotless record for a troublemaker. The room was already clean. The trash was emptied. A thermos sat on the table. Renji had even folded the laundry, something Hayato had doubted he even did before. I'm impressed, Hayato said. You've clearly been pretending to be a functioning human being. Renji chuckled, low and tired. What can I say? Someone gave me a reason to try. They sat together in the small kitchen, steam rising from their mugs. The tea wasn't perfect, it never was, but neither of them cared. Outside, the world moved on, unaware of the quiet moment inside this tiny apartment. Hayato watched the way the light caught on Renji's lashes, the way he laughed softer now, more real. There was something new between them, gentler, surer. Renji leaned his head against the wall. You're really bad at avoiding me. You're really bad at pushing me away, Hayato replied, sipping his tea. Their fingers brushed on the tabletop. Neither moved away. The next morning at school, something unexpected happened. During homeroom, Ms. Naru stood in front of the class, cleared her throat, and said, Before we begin, I want to publicly acknowledge Renji Sakamoto's recent efforts. I may have misjudged him, and for that, I apologize. The class went silent. Renji didn't say a word, just looked down, a slight tension in his jaw. Hayato caught his eye from across the room and gave a small nod. Later, as students filtered out for the day, the two of them fell into step together, naturally, like it had always been that way. They walked along the quiet sidewalk, school bags slung over their shoulders. Their hands bumped once, then again. And then, Renji reached out and took Hayato's hand. No hesitation. No looking around. Just quiet certainty. Hayato turned slightly, the corners of his mouth tugging up. "Next time," he murmured, voice low and fond. "Let me be the one to catch your fever too." Renji squeezed his hand. "Deal." And together, they kept walking, two hearts, once guarded, now beating in time. Thank you so much for spending time with Boys Love Story today. We hope this episode touched your heart, made you smile, or even gave you a moment to escape into something beautiful. If you enjoyed the story, we'd love for you to support us by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with other BL lovers out there. Your support means the world and helps us create more stories filled with love, hope, and healing.